In 1539, colony of Asunción, Domingo Martinez de Irala, Spanish conquistador, is sitting at a campfire at night, sipping a warm brew from a gourd through a hollowed-out straw, which then he passes on to his peers. A ritual they learn from the local Guaraní tribes. They all feel a calm alertness from the caffeinated infusion, and most importantly, a connection with each other. The perfect state for planning the slaughter of a whole village of pagans the next day. Wait, something is very off here. How is it possible that the Spanish conquerors of South America not only did not wipe out the ritual of yerba mate, but started doing it themselves? And even further, how can I be here 500 years later doing the same practice every day, seeing largely the same meaning behind it as the Guaranis? There is actually a pretty logical sequence of events that made this possible. So to begin with, let's go back to the 16th century Rio de la Plata region of South America, the origin of yerba mate and the territory of the Guaraní tribes, the indigenous people who introduced mate to the colonizers. So what most people don't understand about the Guaranis right away is that they were not just one specific tribe living in one village. They were a large set of groups living in present-day Paraguay and parts of Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Bolivia, and they were connected by speaking the same language and the shared cultural origin. They lived a semi-nomadic lifestyle, being hunter-gatherers but also practicing an advanced form of slash-and-burn agriculture, a farming method in which they burned vegetation in a small area which enriched the soil with ash. There, they planted cultivated crops such as corn, cassava, sweet potatoes, beans, peanuts, squash, and several varieties of pineapple. After a few years, when the soil's productivity declined, they packed up and moved to a different area. Yerba mate, though, as far as we know, was not cultivated by them, but despite that, it played a huge role in the Guarani culture. A sort of proof of that is that they called it ka'a, which literally means the plant, which is a pretty renowned title considering just how many different plants they were masters of. Clearly, yerba mate had a special place in their cosmology. They believed it was a plant from which life could re-emerge after cataclysms, and they had many legends regarding its origin. In one of them, the goddess of the moon walked through the jungle in the form of a woman when a jaguar attacked her. A Guarani hunter saved her, and in return, the goddess gifted yerba mate to his tribe. In another legend, the plant was given by the god Pa'i to an old indigenous man who was too weak to follow his tribe, and to his daughter who stayed by his side to take care of him so that the man regained his vitality. There are many other stories, but the idea of yerba mate originating directly from the gods is a central element in all of them. Contemporary records about how the Guarani used yerba mate are scarce and far from the full picture. Researchers believe that the herb was used only during rituals where grinded and smoked leaves of the plant were placed inside the gourd and infused with hot water several times, each time sipped with a hollowed out piece of reed in which they also drilled holes for a filter. The gourd was then passed among the members of the community. The purpose of this ritual was likely to connect with the spirit world and strengthen the community's social bonds. I often wonder if the Guarani had the time, what kind of society or civilization would they have built on the mate ritual's foundations? Probably an amazing one. And in fact, the thought of advanced civilizations using yerba mate in the past, before or contemporary with the Guaranis, is much more realistic than you might think. Yerba mate leaves have been found in several at least 1,000-year-old burials in the northern Andes and the Atlantic coast of Peru as deliberately placed grave goods, which means it was transported for more than 3,000 kilometers in the most rugged terrain imaginable, crossing the whole continent. And the only reason we're actually finding it there is that the hyper-arid climate of the region preserves organic material amazingly. But if yerba mate was used in the Gran Chaco or literally anywhere in the Amazon rainforest, we would have no trace of it as the acidic soil there dissolves everything other than stone. And actually, we're constantly discovering the stone foundations of large-scale urban infrastructure in the Amazon. So if the Indian empires knew about the herb, it's highly likely that the garden cities of the Amazon also did. A point where hunter-gatherers' myths about it as a gift from the gods gain some very interesting possible meanings. Either way, it's 100% sure that mate did not spend its whole interaction with humans in ritualistic use by the local Guaranis, and what we know of its full story is just the tip of the iceberg. There is one case though where we do have a well-documented story of an advanced civilization encountering yerba mate. The first Spanish expeditions arrived during the first half of the 16th century. Accustomed to forming alliances with more powerful rivaling tribes, the Guaraní chose the same tactic when faced the Spanish. At least initially, this alliance was mutually beneficial for both sides. The Spanish benefited from Guaraní's supply chains and their extensive knowledge of the region, and conquistadors like Domingo Martinez de Irala leading campaigns of mass murder among rivaling tribes like the Payaga tipped the power balance towards the Guaraní's side. This relationship also led to a two-way cultural exchange. Many Guaranís converted to Christianity and adopted European customs, while the Spaniards adopted Guaraní warrior traditions and practices, including polygamy. Guaraní kinship traditions played a huge role in this whole process. Giving young women to other tribes was a common way of forming alliances, and the alliance with the Spanish was also accompanied by this practice. Since the mostly male settlers needed women to populate the colonies and working hands to perform household and agricultural labor, they readily accepted these arrangements. Modern historians debate whether this gifting truly occurred as described, or whether Spanish settlers were simply taking Guaraní women by force and later romanticized the practice. What is certain, however, is that Spanish settlers commonly had several indigenous partners. Contemporary sources even mention men with more than 60 wives. This earned Paraguay the nickname Paradise of Muhammad at the time, as Islam also permits polygamy. This interbreeding created many mixed households and opened an entirely new channel for cultural transmission. The Guaraní women brought the ancient knowledge of the preparation and the social ritual of yerba mate with them and shared it with their husbands and children, who would later make up a large part of the colonial society. This allowed yerba mate to integrate into European culture as a ritual rather than merely a beverage, without being stripped of its original meaning as a social rite. In this sense, the story of yerba mate is unique among stimulant drinks. While coffee, tea and chocolate were stripped from their original cultural context and their consumption were commercialized through cafes and tea houses, there is no such thing as a mate house, and canned, ready-to-drink mate is a very new thing and widely known for being not the real form of the drink. And this is crazy if you think about it. Like, people today use a filter straw made not from reed but steel and carry hot water in a thermos instead of making a fire. We still drink mate from gourds, use loose leaf, infuse several times, and always share it with anyone nearby who also wants to drink it. And although we could hardly live further from the spirits of the rainforest, drinking mate takes everyone at least a little step closer to nature and also powers us in a civilizational setting. And this was as true 500 years ago. Yerba mate had everything it needed to conquer colonial society. Its caffeine boost fueled the construction of colonies, and its antioxidants and vitamins helped settlers better tolerate the diseases of the New World. Unsurprisingly, mate quickly spread beyond the confines of its area of origin and swept through the colonial empire like a wildfire. Because this expansion happened before colonial society reached its final rigid structure, mate could penetrate every social layer. Consumption of the herb was largely independent on class or ethnicity. The wealthy merchants of Lima were just as hooked to drinking mate as the coal miners of Potosi or the agricultural slaves of southern Brazil. Initially, colonial authorities strongly opposed yerba mate, portraying the pagan ritual as a heresy that's also causing laziness and just generally poisoning Spanish society. But after demonization campaigns and bans completely failed to stop the herb spread, the government realized that yerba mate trade could become a key economic pillar of the empire rather than its enemy. Ironically and tragically, the Guaraní's success at passing their mate customs to the conquerors ultimately backfired when the Spanish started organized trade of the herb, beginning an era known as the Green Gold Rush. Despite half the colonial empire being mate addicted, they still haven't realized how to cultivate it and grow it in organized plantations. In other words, it was a wild plant living deep in the forest. This practice of growing yerba mate in its natural habitat is actually the most sustainable way, with farmers returning to it today. But back then, the problem was that the Spanish basically took local people as slaves and demanded impossible-sized retrievals. Hauling 100-kilo plus packages of leaves through the jungle, tens of thousands of Guaraní people have died from starvation, disease, or exhaustion, with these practices going for some 200 years before being abolished at the end of the 19th century. So, the adoption of yerba mate was far from smooth, but thanks to this cultural exchange, the practice did not vanish like so many others during the colonial era, and the ritual of yerba mate still lives on in modern Guaraníes, the cultures of Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and southern Brazil, and all around the world, because in recent decades yerba mate started a new global conquest, but that is a story for a different video. You can check it out right here, and if you like this one, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and see you in a different Mateverse.